welcome to One More Thing podcast, sponsored by Springs County. I'm your host, Tyeri Apia, and today we have a very special guest on the show, founder of Springs County, Tim Marden.
Hello, what's happening? How are you?
All right, how are you today?
I'm very good. Looking forward to the show.
Great. So, since you're here, Tim, a lot of people have been talking about Springs County. And as somebody who doesn't know about Springs County, what can you tell us about Springs County? How did it start? How did it begin? How did you do it in the first place?
Sure. Well, Springs County was really born out of frustration with Alachua County. Three of the main things that were happening is the county was suing the city of Alachua. They were competing against private business, something they're actually still doing today. And they had also been refusing to let the rural parts of the county have any sort of representation on the county. You know, all the seats are voted for by the entire county. The districts is kind of just a sham. And because the city of Gainesville has their thumb on the scale as far as the number of votes, it really disenfranchises what we've come to talk as the donut of the county, so to speak. So Springs County was a little bit of a reaction to what they were doing. It was people who are prideful and mindful of things like liberty and personal freedom and choice and those sorts of things because they just get sick and tired of the government telling them what to do all the time. The government's gotten too big, it's gotten too expensive, and we certainly know that it's all too intrusive. So that was a little bit of the backdrop of what kind of brought it about. And we just started talking and it picked up a lot of momentum. Today we've got over 9,000 petitions as we sit here for people who are interested in Springs County. And, you know, out of a county of, just a couple 100,000, that's a significant amount. It's more than the city of Gainesville elections, actually, on a percentage basis.
And how would you go about signing one of these petitions?
Well, folks can go to our website, springscounty.com/petition, and they can download one right there, print it out, mail it in. The instructions are on the form. Or there's also a digital link that takes them to a change.org option. So they have both ways of doing that.
And for you, Tim, what was the straw that I want to know what was the straw that broke the camel's back? What was the exact incident where you're like, you know what, it's time that we should make a new county?
We had actually talked about this. About 5 years ago, now 6 years ago, but it didn't really pick up as much steam back then. And really what brought it to the forefront last year was the county's reaction with relation to the mask mandate with COVID. I can't remember the exact dates anymore, but at one point the county had sunsetted the mask mandate. And then 3 hours later, they go into a joint meeting with the city of Gainesville. The Gainesville City Commission just kind of harassed them into taking back their repeal. So they basically reinstated the mask mandate, and people just kind of flipped out. I think intuitively people knew that something was up even back then. So this really just kind of set them off in a different direction. My phone started ringing off the hook. People were sending me messages and texts and all just kinds of stuff about, hey, Tim, whatever happened to Springs County? Where is that right now? Because we just can't take any more of this. And it got its own, kind of second legs, and we are kind of where we are now.
Wow, that's amazing. So do you think? So I guess Gainesville is pretty unique in comparison to where you're at as a Newberry City Commissioner.
Yes. The city of Gainesville and the Alachua County Commission are in pretty much lockstep with each other for the most part. They pretend like they don't like each other, and basically they're just kind of fighting for more government. And I have come to realize that most of the people on the western side of the county are just the polar opposite of that. The trajectory of Alachua County is more government regulation, more control, more taxes, and people are just sick and tired of it, Ty. They are over it. They want something new, and they just see Springs County as that option, and they're willing to put their money into it. They're willing to put their volunteer hours into it. They're willing to do a lot of stuff just to get away from Alachua County because they know it's not getting any better. This last year has made that painfully obvious to everybody that it's not going to get any better.
Yes, and myself included. That's why I'm here with you. We're here with you today.
Yeah,
One of the reasons I'm here with you today.
Exactly. I mean, you're the classic individual who started kind of figuring stuff out for yourself. You started getting, into the rhetoric and comparing it to the reality, and noticing there is completely two different stories going on here. And I think a lot of people are in your boat and have just started figuring things out a little bit better, because it's not like they're hiding it anymore, right? I mean, you see what they're doing. I mean, it's you've got to have a permit for a water sprinkler system now. They tried to change up all the regulations with regards to retention ponds. And don't get me wrong, I care about the environment just as much as the next guy. But whereas they think more government is the answer, I don't think that more government is the answer. Government creates a lot of problems, and I just don't have any history where I think that the government is very good at anything. I don't know. Maybe you can tell me. Do you think the government's good at anything besides spending money, of course?
No, I definitely don't think the government's good at anything. They create problems, then they offer solutions that cause more problems, then offer more solutions which create more problems. It's this never-ending cycle of more problems. The left has kind of went so left that it's actually pushed me more right. That's kind of how I feel in this situation.
I can understand that. We're kind of just circling the drain, and until somebody like the Springs County puts a stopper in the drain, we're going to continue to go down. And that's where I see people who think the same way that I do. They realize they can make, for goodness sakes, they're adults. They can make their own decisions for themselves, what's best for them, what's best for their family. Big government wonks like the people down in the city of Gainesville and Alachua County Commission, they just don't think the way that we think, Ty. They think that they got all the answers. And it's funny, I often hear, and we'll see on Facebook, about their supporters, and all their supporters are promoting more government. And they always use the excuse, hey, people can't make these decisions on their own, is really what it boils down to. But miraculously, some board with 5 government minions can make that decision for everybody. You can't make your own decision, but they can make it for everybody else. It's just totally useless and pointless and doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
It's an oligarchy.
Yes, it is an oligarchy.
That's how I see it.
Yeah, on a very micro level, that's exactly what it is. And people always ask me, why do they do this? To me, it's about power and control. They want to have more of both, and they're just kind of geared that way. If you look at a lot of their arguments, they start at the finish line and work backwards from that. If you ever notice, so they will pick up a goal or some place where they want to get to, and they find evidence that backs them, so they reverse engineer it. Whereas somebody who has a little bit more conservative, liberty, freedom-minded approach, they just kind of look at the evidence and go where the evidence takes them. And I think it's a more honest approach, because what's funny is if you look at the left or you look at liberals just in general, when they take that approach, you could have the exact same evidence and they come to a totally different conclusion because they work backwards instead of going forward, if that makes any sense.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. What would you say somebody can do to really help the Springs County advance and make it even more of a reality?
Sure. The number one thing is to get educated. The educated electorate is what makes things happen, because just like sports, in order for you to know whether the team is committing a penalty, what do you got to know first?
You got to know the rules.
You got to know the rules. So get educated about the rules of Spring County and how it works and how it could work. We're about less government, smaller government, less taxes, more freedom. Understand that it's the state legislature that makes these choices, and we have to engage Representative Clemens, Senator Perry, Representative Yvonne Hayes Henson, and make sure that they understand that they can make this happen. They can make this a reality, but you've got to give them the right information. This hasn't been done in nearly 100 years, so it takes a little bit of homework. And I'll kind of go into that a little bit. assets and the liabilities, number one, are divided along the line for which the state prescribes. So let's say, as we've talked about, the line is 34th Street. Everything to the west of 34th Street that used to be Alachua County now becomes Springs County's. This is literally like a political divorce. You take one car, I take the other car. You get the house, I get the apartment, whatever. So we divide up the assets and the liabilities. So all the county roads become Springs County roads. We do not buy them again. That's one big question we get. You don't have to buy the schools again. You don't have to buy the roads again. You don't have to buy the pipes, the power lines, all of that stuff. If it was Alachua County's, we paid for it, right? It all comes from the taxpayers to begin with. So we assume all of that stuff right out of the gate. We don't have to buy it all again. Same thing with Sheriff's Department, Fire Rescue. All of those assets are divided as well. You're going to have let's say it's half of the population. So half of the fire trucks go to Springs County. Half of the sheriff's deputy vehicles go to Springs County. We don't have to buy all that stuff again. So that's a big question that people have. How do we afford it? The fact is we've actually paid for all of it already. So I believe that once Springs County is enacted, because of our approach, giving more power to the people instead of government, we can drive down the costs of government, because if the government's smaller, it costs less. If it costs less, you need less taxes to make it run. So that's where lower taxes come in. And because it's smaller, it gives you and I and our families of the listeners, more freedom to do what they want. Now, of course, there is a moral component. I think it was Thomas Jefferson or John Adams who said, we are built for moral people. We are wholly inadequate for any other. So with that freedom comes responsibility. So it's not the Wild Wild West. More freedom is not the Wild Wild West. A limited amount of government makes us all freer because of the way it's built. And that's kind of why we're a constitutional republic and why we are not a democracy, for goodness sakes. A democracy is mob rule, right?
Exactly.
So it's understanding those sorts of themes, contacting the state legislatures, and making sure that they understand where you sit on the situation. Getting a petition signed, getting your friends and family to do the same thing, and come out to some of the stuff that we're doing. We are endeavoring right now in a year of service. We've been doing service projects every month. They're on our Facebook page at Springs County. They're on our mailing list if you're on the mailing list. And if you want to get on the mailing list, just go to thespringscounty.com, look at the info tab, and send us an email. We'll get you into the database so you're aware of what we have going on. Right now we're doing a couple of Constitution series workshops. We start one on the 17th at the Mustang Grill, who was a great sponsor of one of our events last year. We are doing trash cleanups. We're really, I think, putting our where the rubber meets the road. I think we're actually doing the stuff that everybody on the left claims that they do, but you don't ever see them actually doing. You ever see anybody from the left picking up trash and making their neighborhood better?
No, you really don't. And they always claim that we don't. The conservatives don't care about the environment.
Yeah, well, we have the pictures and the evidence to say, and the full roll-off dumpsters to prove it. So I'll take on that challenge any day of the week. I really have been flattered by the level of volunteerism that has sprung out of the Springs County initiative and the effort. That's been very heartwarming for me. And it's a great life lesson. I see a lot of moms with kids, dads with kids, families that are coming out, and that's the sweet spot. That's where we have to be. Don't rely on government to do everything for you, because number one, they're not going to be good at it, and they're going to spend too much money at it. So why have them do it when we can do it on our own? And it can be a sense of pride that we have a clean community and we take care of our own stuff. We take care of our neighbor. I mean, what's wrong with that?
Nothing at all. What would you say is some of the obstacles that you faced dealing with, bringing Springs County up? What are some of the obstacles, if any, that you've experienced?
Yeah, there's plenty of obstacles, but nothing that's insurmountable. Really kind of getting into the state constitution, understanding the nuts and bolts, and then being able to communicate that to people. and letting them know that it's not as hard as you may necessarily think at first blush. When you actually get into it and you start looking at it, well, goodness, this isn't much different than, say, your tax bill no longer saying Alachua County on it, and now it says Springs County on it instead. We have gotten to a point where we think that government is so complicated, again, because it's so intrusive in our lives. If it was broken down to just the necessities and everything else was left to us to do on our own, government becomes a lot smaller and much more A, manageable for the citizen, but B, understandable for the citizen as well. The way that government has gotten nowadays, it makes it very cumbersome for average Joe to get involved because they don't feel like they're going to make a difference. They don't feel like they're even heard to begin with. And then they've got to figure out in their off time while they're trying to take care of their kids and go to church and go to work and all that stuff to try to figure out this big behemoth thing they call government. And that's all been empire building by government. They have kind of built it that way to get average Joe out of the picture so they can just kind of do whatever they want. And like you brought up earlier, that's usually creating more problems that they create or offer a solution. And from my seat, every time one of those solutions come down the pipe, it equates to less and less freedom for you and I and the listeners.
Yes, and I think you're spot on with that. And I think with many people, why this could even be difficult to get into. For some people, it might be difficult to get into Springs County because it does mean that you're going to have to take on more responsibility. With that freedom comes more responsibility. You'll have to take what the government is doing now, and you'll have to actually bear that responsibility in front of your shoulders, and have to do more work.
Yeah, and I come across people who they say, "Well, I can't handle anything else on my plate." Well, the reason you're in that situation now, if I actually got into it with you, is probably because of government. So if we take government off your plate, which probably takes up too much of your plate to begin with, there's room for that other kind of stuff. And it's a much more balanced approach when you're doing it yourself, because the government approach is one size fits all. It's very socialistic in its nature. And maybe that doesn't fit for Ty. Maybe that doesn't fit for Tim. Maybe that doesn't fit for Rob or Rebecca or Joe. So what are you left with? You've got to kind of customize that for yourself and what fits your needs. Who's the best person to do that? Government? Heck no. You are. Live it. Own it. Do what's best for you. Because if the government is doing it, it's costing you more money than it probably needs to, for number one. And hey, if you don't have to work overtime to pay the government, guess what? You got more time for your friends and your family, right? That's right.
That's why I love the Springs County initiative. There's no option to just be an individual. You have to be.
Yeah, not the way it is now.
I find that the dynamic is it's kind of a dynamic between individualist and collectivist. That's what it is. The government, with how the government operates in Gainesville, and the liberals are just collectivist people. They think that the group mindset overrules the individual mindset, and there's no room for the individual at all.
There's more room for your friends and family in the individual approach, believe it or not, than the collectivist approach, because you can customize that. When you get government out of the way, you can focus more on your friends and family, the way your friends and family need to be taken care of. We talked earlier about the responsibility that freedom gives you. We have a responsibility. Love thy neighbor. We have a responsibility to our neighbor to help them out if they need to. And I just value the relationship side of it than the government regulation side of it. And and I both know, when you look at that collective approach, or collectivist socialist approach, there's a big scheme going on. It's a big sham. Socialism does not make everybody equal. If you think for 1 second that the guy that used to be driving the Mercedes is all of a sudden going to be driving a Chevy because everybody's got to be equal, you're kidding yourself. Socialism creates two classes. It creates the haves and it creates the have-nots. There is no middle class. That's why you see so many things that are an attack on the middle class. Why do you think we have all of these bailouts and all this money that's getting given away? It creates a dependent class. Who is the dependent class? The have-nots. Where does it come from? The middle class. Because the haves are going to keep theirs. They're not going to do it less. I can tell you that right now. They're going to line their pockets. Yeah, buddy. They're going to line their pockets as much as possible. And that's just the reality. They try to cater to the poor and tell them all these lies and tell them all these stories about how life is going to get so much better if we just take from the people that have it and give it to you. Well, how many of those people from Hollywood are writing a check to the IRS and giving more of their money back? You never hear any of that stuff. Do they do some charity work? Yeah. Is that genuine? Maybe some of it's genuine, but I think a lot of it's kind of a publicity stunt. But in the end, anything that government does, it's going to be more cumbersome and more costly than it needs to be.
Well, the socialists are going to blame the conservatives that this is happening anyways.
Yeah, I will happily take.
They'll say it's Trump.
Oh, I will. I'll happily take on that. I'll happily take on that challenge any day. I will debate anybody, anywhere, anytime. If they want to put the socialist option up against the freedom liberty option, I'll happily take on that debate. It does not matter to me because I can not only talk the talk, but I can walk the walk, and I don't think that they can.
It's going to be huge when Springs County gets off the ground to see that this will continue to just blossom and just be better than how Gainesville is going to be. A lot of people aren't going to like it. No. I think there would be a lot of hate to see that freedom and liberty are winning.
And isn't that all the more reason to do it? Think of what you just said. They're going to be angry and aggravated because we are free to do what we want to do. How backwards is that mentality? That's just ridiculous. My mind doesn't even really think that way. It's kind of like good cops are the most like a criminal because they think like the criminal. I just don't think that way. So I would not make a very good lefty because I'm not programmed to think that way. It's not my wheelhouse.
Because I've heard so many people say that this can never work. That's why we have this government intrusion in our lives. They say freedom, liberty. This is why we need more laws. We need more taxes because people can't be trusted to have that amount of freedom. Because kind of how you spoke earlier about some people think when you have more freedom, it's going to be like the Wild Wild West. Everybody's going to be shooting each other because we have the Second Amendment. And we're just going to go crazy, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
That's why we need more government intrusion in our lives.
And how's that working out for us?
Not so good. But for the lefties, obviously, if you talk to them, they just want more and more of it.
But what is the mantra of socialism? Eventually, you run out of what?
Money.
Other people's money.
Unless
you're the Federal Reserve and you got a printing press and you can make as much money as you want, but we know that ends up being the Weimar Republic, and we're headed in that direction right now. We could go off on a tangent about the Federal Reserve if you want, but maybe that's a good topic for another show. Let's just.
You won't believe how many people I've talked to that genuinely believe that we have unlimited money.
Really?
I'm serious. Many lefties. Well, we could give money to foreign countries. Why can't we give money over here? We need reparations. We need more tax cuts. We need stimulus checks. We need more.
Yeah,
which it doesn't make sense, but I can understand why they think that when they see all this money, all this foreign aid going to other people and not us. Like, why can't we just spend the money here?
Well,
on us and give us more welfare checks.
Yeah,
stimulus packages.
That is a whole other animal. But there is nothing really constitutional about foreign aid. I don't care if it's going to Israel or it's going to Ethiopia or it's going to South Korea. The whole concept of foreign aid is nothing more than a large-scale vote-buying cooperation program. What we do with the stimulus checks is nothing more than a vote-buying scheme on the American people.
I call it bribes.
Yes. Okay, so you're a little bit more direct.
I definitely call it. I've known Democrats that said, if I know Joe Biden, if I could vote Joe Biden and he'll give me those 3,000 checks, I'm voting him in.
Yeah, there's one of the, I'm not sure if it's a founding father or just somebody in the past who has said, that the republic is over when the majority of people have figured out that they can just vote for the person who will give them more stuff. That's kind of paraphrased, but it is true. And to think that we can just keep giving stimulus checks is very short-sighted. A year and a half ago, what were we hearing about? Universal basic income, the $15 minimum wage. And what was everybody on our side of the aisle, quote unquote, talking about when you just arbitrarily raise the minimum wage? Prices for everything are going to go up because people are going to be willing to pay more for it. I've got an economics degree. I understand the laws of supply and demand. And if people have more money, it's just going to drive up prices. There's no way around that. I mean, we can see it at the pump right now. So you've got to have two factors going in. You've got people that are clamoring for a higher minimum wage, and the government should never be in the price control business. Price control and wage control is a bad recipe. And we have gotten used to the government doing this kind of stuff, and it's not working out for us. So we have a combination of upward pressure on wages artificially to get to minimum wages that are higher, this universal basic income under 13 different titles basically right now. And then you have the Federal Reserve printing money like it's going out of style. And, it's the physical appearance of printing money. Really, it's just digital ones and zeros flying through the internet, going into people's bank accounts. But we come up with a lot of government programs in order to balance the balance sheet at the bank, because you can't. A bank, if you know anything about accounting, a bank can't just all of a sudden poof have money just dumped into it. It has to have a liability to account for it. So it either has an IOU in there, it has a loan, or it has some sort of obligation like a CD or something, because otherwise it's out of whack. And when we have cash for clunkers, free cell phones, all these little government programs, it's to help create liabilities so the banking can balance at the end of the day. There's a really good book that was commissioned by the John Birch Society called The Creature from Jekyll Island. I would encourage all the listeners to check it out. It's by a gentleman named G. Edward Griffin. G. Edward Griffin no longer works for the Birch Society. He's kind of done his own thing for a number of years. One of the big things that he does now is the Red Pill Expo. But
is that similar to JBS?
It's really just kind of a conference, from what I understand. People go and they listen to speakers. They get involved with organizations. Hopefully, it's an activism sort of related thing. Because I don't like the eat, meet, and retreat stuff. I think we're on a limited time schedule, and we need to have activities involved. That's really what's kind of brought about this podcast, is the whole concept of just doing one more thing. Can we get you to do one more thing than you were doing today or yesterday for liberty and freedom? And that's really hopefully what we can build this podcast into, getting people to just do one more thing than they're doing right now. Because if we get thousands of people doing one more thing, that's game changing.
That's 1,000 more things.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's really kind of the direction that we're pointed with this podcast. We want people to share it. We want people to subscribe and comment and get engaged. We know that a lot of people listen to podcasts. The market has spoken. That's kind of why we're here, why we're talking today, and why we're doing these sorts of episodes. We want, hey, email Springs County if you have a show idea. let us know. We're just getting this thing started, and we could kind of use all the help that we can get. We don't want to talk about junk that people don't care about. Tell us what you care about.
Exactly. Now, speaking of JBS, you are a member of the JBS.
I'm actually
a John Birch Society.
I'm actually a staff member. I work for the John Birch Society. Have so for a couple of years. I'm what's called a development officer, and I cover the eastern United States. And really, it's kind of most people would probably equate it in their mind to a fundraiser, but it's a little bit more than a fundraiser because you're in the relationship business, the funding and the donations and the advertising and those sort of things are basically fruit of that relationship because you have the relationship first. And it's very important for any movement to have not only financing but members. I just serve the financing part or that leg of the stool. If you think of it like a three-legged stool, I'm on the financing leg. We have members, volunteers all over the country in all 50 states that are the membership leg. And then we have the third leg, which I kind of dub as the home office. They're the ones that create all the material. They create all the videos. They create all the print. They create the bulletin and the agenda, because the agenda is really the playbook on a monthly basis of what people should be doing. We're not just another group. The Birch Society is not just another group that gets together and talks about problems. You know, the world's full of problem identifiers. We need people like you and I that are problem solvers. If you're a problem solver, you're listening to this podcast, and get in touch with us through the info@springscounty.com. Call me, Tim Marden, email me, whatever. Get in touch with us and get in the boat, start pulling an oar, and we can move this ship. We can get something going, because I'm a sports analogy guy. If it's a football and it's on the field, nothing is going to get that football to move until somebody takes action and picks it up and moves it from where it is to where it needs to go. We could sit and talk about the football. We could watch videos about the football. We could share videos about the football. But
there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah. It ain't going to move anywhere until somebody takes physical action to pick it up and move it. And that's a lot of what this podcast is hopefully going to create, is people taking action and doing one more thing than they're doing right now.
Now, last question, Tim. Many of the leftists I've seen on Facebook have said that the John Birch Society is a racist society. Where does this come from? Is there any merit to this?
It comes from a public, basically a smear campaign. Back in the organization was founded in '58. So in the 60s, you had a lot of the civil rights activism going on. And the Birch Society stance was simply, hey, this isn't an issue in the Constitution, so it's not a federal issue. Who would it be left to? The states and the people. So it was more about the states and the people addressing it versus the federal government addressing it. That's the only thing that it was about. Now, of course, the lefties at the time, because we were built to combat communism and the rise of that in America, they take things out of context. It's the same thing that happened to the Tea Party movement. It's the same thing that happened to Trump, although both have their problems as far as I'm concerned. I'm not a huge Trump advocate. People think that I am. I'm not a big Trumper, but I do appreciate the good things that he did. But back in the 60s and 70s, when a lot of that stuff was going on, the lefties went crazy and they painted the Birch Society into a corner and created this whole smear campaign, which is really where the racist kind of tag came from. But I'll tell you, here's a couple interesting facts. And I've shared the picture with you, I believe. I actually carry a collage of several black people who, at the time of getting the smear, were on our National Speakers Bureau. They went around the country and spoke with people about race and about racism in America. We had the wonderful Julia Brown, Leonard Patterson. These people, Ty, were in the Communist Party. They got out of the Communist Party when they realized the communists were basically trying to co-opt the black community into believing that all this stuff is against you and all that sort of stuff. So they got out of the Communist Party. They came to us. as national speakers. Julia Brown, for instance, at her own threat to her own life, was an informant for the FBI. So she would go to these communist meetings. She would come out, report. She'd go back in. She'd come out, report. And then she eventually started talking about what was really going on. And people don't like the truth. People do not like the truth. So they blasted her left and right. And I'm not sure how old you are, but there was a movie that came out in the 80s called Mississippi Burning. Mississippi Burning was about a gentleman that was inside the Klan who was trying to take down the Klan because he knew how bad it was. It's not in the movie, but that man is modeled after a Birch Society member who did that very same thing.
Wow.
Believe it or not. And then that movie stars Gene Hackman. But that movie is about trying to take down the Klan, and that was a Birch member that was trying to do that. So come at me with the racist label all you want. I've got the armor to deflect any accusation that you have. And it's really, I mean, at this point, isn't the race card about the lowest hanging fruit card you can
It
buy?
really is. It's gotten so
It's a
old.
waste.
It's gotten so old. It's overused now
Very.
that it kind of makes victims of real racism. It makes it feel like it's not real to them. It kind of undermines an actual victim of racism now.
And we have actual victims. And we have actual victims of that kind of garbage. And it's complete nonsense. But you're right. It kind of waters it down for those legitimate cases. And I feel bad for those people. It's not right.
Mm-hmm. All right, that is Mr. Tim Marden, founder of Springs County. I'm glad to have you on. That concludes our show. One more thing. And
So what's the one more thing we're going to give them, Ty?
that one more thing, we want the people to get on springscounty.org, download a petition.
.com.
springscounty.com, and come out to our Constitution meeting.
Yep.
Which is
you can come out Saturday. This Saturday we'll be concluding the Constitution series here at the Welcome Center, but we're going to be starting a new one this Thursday, June 17th at the Mustang Grill at 7 p.m. But if I can interrupt, I would say the one more thing that we want people to do, if you are in earshot of this podcast, go to the springscounty.com website and sign a petition for us, and then get 4 or 5 of your friends and family to do the same thing. I would love to wheel into the State House with about 10 or 15,000 petitions in a little red wagon in front of the state legislature and say, hey, tell all these people no. Tell all these people that you don't want to hear their voice. I think that's very powerful. We're right on the edge of 10,000. The people listening to this podcast can get us over the threshold. There is no magic number that we need, but I just like the round number of 10,000. At a minimum, getting 10,000. So that's the one more thing that I think we can leave people with today.
Thanks for coming on, Tim. That is one more thing.
Thanks a lot.
Good night.